For what? What law have we violated?
We hadn't done anything wrong. I was handcuffed and accompanied the other people into the paddy wagon.
Kept taking our pictures and fingerprints. I realized that we weren't getting out right away. 3 felonies? I just couldn't imagine, just for trying to share the gospel.
We have compartmentalized where the gospel is allowed to go. That's what we've done.
The gay community wants tolerance. They can't tolerate a story like mine that says, you know, I used to be gay, but with the help of Jesus, I've been able to overcome that.
I believe the caricature that's painted of Christians as being mean and hateful, it creates a context where violence is being perpetrated against Christians.
The way Americans think about homosexuality has changed over the last 2 decades, and if you think that's an accident, think again. 2 homosexual activists wrote the book in 1989, After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. In that book, Marshall Kirk and Hunter Madsen laid out powerful and sophisticated propaganda techniques to manipulate people into accepting the homosexual lifestyle. Hello, I'm Janet Parshall, and in this program we'll examine the agenda and the accomplishment of homosexual activists and the impact of their astonishing success on families and on our freedom of religion. Stay tuned. This program could change the way you see the future of your family and our nation.
Being politically correct has replaced being biblically correct.
Is a direct attack on religious freedom.
If we don't speak up and get involved, then we're aiding and abetting the destruction of Christianity.
We never thought that this would ever happen in America.
In their book, Kirk and Madsen proposed a strategy for homosexual activists to gain acceptance from a skeptical public using 3 basic techniques of propaganda: desensitizing, jamming, and conversion. According to the author, straight Americans were on triple red alert because they perceived homosexuals to be an overwhelming threat. But if activists weren't offensive, straights might remain annoyed by their lifestyle, but eventually would become desensitized to it. And the second step in their strategy was jamming. Jamming has the same effect on a person's belief system as jamming a tire iron into a machine to destroy it. And it works like this. First, it throws your belief system into conflict by linking something you believe to be good with something bad, and then making what you believe socially unacceptable. Homosexual activists redefined words. They began to call themselves gays. They labeled people who disagreed with them homophobes and bigots. The trick, Kirk and Madsen said, is to get someone opposed to homosexuality into the position of feeling a conflicting twinge of shame whenever his homo hatred surfaces. Our effect is achieved without reference to facts, logic, or proof. They proposed a technique called conversion. Kirk and Madsen said they would bombard the public with images of homosexuals who look like the kind of men people admire, women desire, and other men want to be like. Kirk and Madsen wrote, "It makes no difference that the images were lies, and by conversion, we actually mean something far more profoundly threatening to the American way of life. We mean conversion of the average American's emotions, mind, and will through a planned psychological attack in the form of propaganda fed to the nation via the media." Now keep in mind, this was written in 1989. Homosexual activists have come a long way using these techniques. In this program, we're going to look at the homosexual movement, their accomplishments, their political objectives, and the effect on your family and our nation. Since the media is so important to their agenda, let's begin there.
We're at a point in 2008 where there were 65 gay characters in the new television season on primetime and in cable, the largest number of recurring gay characters in history, according to GLAAD. Now, these gay characters have a very important role. They're usually the appealing friend, often persuading people to rethink their traditional morality and come around by the end of the show and realize that their aversion to homosexuality just stemmed from bigotry or ignorance. It's the same script over and over and over.
I now pronounce them officially
married.
I've been surprised at how quickly the concept that homosexuals should be allowed special rights, and it's probably because there have been people who are in positions of influence throughout our society that are promoting those ideas in schools, in government, in media, in Hollywood, in advertising. It seems like there's nowhere you can turn where you're not being bombarded with messages that claim that homosexuals and transsexuals and others should be given special rights.
Ashland, Kentucky is coal country, nestled in the state's eastern corner on the border of West Virginia and Ohio. People here are mainly conservative, the community tight-knit. It's a place where families raise their children with traditional values. But even this picturesque community hasn't escaped the reach of the homosexual lobby. When Boyd County schools introduced sexual diversity training that promoted the homosexual lifestyle and made it a mandatory part of the curriculum, student T.J. Morrison's family took them to court.
First thing I think we heard was, the ACLU has come in and they're going to have a gay training.
Well, they basically told us from the beginning that the kids were not allowed to disagree, that this was an anti-harassment, anti-bullying video. And they never brought up anything about homosexuality when they were discussing it. But then when you watch the video, the entire content of the video was on homosexuality.
The video in question presented homosexuality as an immutable or unchangeable characteristic. Students were told they could not make any comments that disagreed with this idea, and they were not allowed to object on religious grounds. But there was also no provision for parents to opt their children out of the program.
They have a right to go out and say that they're gay and, gay is good and all this other stuff. I should have a right to say that I don't believe in it.
Well, what's going on in many of these situations is it's an attempt to silence people who basically hold to a traditional view of marriage and oppose same-sex conduct and sexual activity.
And they said that once that child steps through that door, they belong to the school district. And I specifically asked them, I said, you're telling me that my child is no longer mine as long as he's on school property? And they said that is correct.
These children should have the same rights as anybody else to be able to express their opinions in opposition to homosexual conduct, and they should not be forced by the government into situations where they're being indoctrinated in beliefs the parents don't agree with. Parents really need to stand up for these kinds of situations and just not let it go by.
T.J. Morrison felt a great deal of support from his fellow students.
I got a lot of, I'm glad you're doing this, and it takes a lot of guts to do this.
When these kinds of situations come, when there's this sort of intimidation that's going on, that people need to stand up for what's right, for their children, for future generations. What will our children and grandchildren grow up in? What kind of society will they grow up in if basically all sexual behavior and all forms of marriage are defined as equally valid? That is a recipe for national decline over time. That no nation can sustain itself with that kind of sexual and family ethic.
Attorneys with the Alliance Defense Fund filed the lawsuit on behalf of T.J. Morrison in February 2005. The case has been in the court system since that date and is currently being appealed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. The main issue in this case is that Christian students should not be prohibited from expressing their beliefs. The attorneys believe T.J. is entitled to a judicial ruling that affirms his constitutional rights.